Muhammad Ali stood at Malcolm X's grave in 2005, 40 years after his mentor's assassination, and finally spoke the words he'd been too afraid to say for decades. Turning my back on Malcolm was one of the mistakes that I regret most in my life. This is the story of one of history's most powerful friendships, how it was destroyed by fear and politics, and how that betrayal haunted Ali until the day he died. The year was 1962. Cassius Clay was 20 years old, brash, undefeated, and hungry for something more than boxing glory. He'd won an Olympic gold medal. He was tearing through professional opponents with ease, but he felt empty inside, searching for meaning beyond the ring. That's when he met Malcolm X, and everything changed. Malcolm X was 37 years old, 17 years older than Clay. He was the most prominent minister of the Nation of Islam, a separatist black religious movement led by Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm was brilliant, charismatic, and dangerous in the eyes of white America. He preached black pride, black self-reliance, and resistance to white oppression. While Martin Luther King Jr. was preaching nonviolence and integration, Malcolm was saying that black people had the right to defend themselves by any means necessary. The FBI had Malcolm under constant surveillance. White politicians considered him a terrorist. Even many black leaders thought he was too radical, too angry, too divisive. But to young Cassius Clay, Malcolm X was everything he wanted to be: confident, uncompromising, and unapologetically black. They met at a Nation of Islam event in Detroit. Malcolm was speaking, and Clay was in the audience. After the speech, Clay approached Malcolm and introduced himself. "I'm Cassius Clay, the boxer. I'm going to be the heavyweight champion of the world someday." Malcolm looked at this young, skinny fighter with the big mouth and the bigger dreams, and he smiled. "I believe you will be, brother, and when you are, you can use that platform to help our people." That conversation was the beginning of a friendship that would change both their lives. Malcolm became Clay's spiritual mentor, his political guide, and his closest confidant. They talked on the phone for hours. Malcolm traveled to Clay's training camps. He taught the young fighter about black history, about the brutal reality of racism in America, about the dignity and beauty of being black in a world that told black people they were inferior. "Malcolm made me think," Ali would later say. "He made me proud of who I was. Before Malcolm, I was just a boxer. After Malcolm, I understood that I could be something more." The relationship deepened as Clay prepared for his championship fight against Sonny Liston in February 1964. Nobody gave Clay a chance. Liston was considered unbeatable, a terrifying fighter who destroyed the previous champion in one round. The betting odds were 7-1 against Clay. Sports writers predicted he'd be carried out of the ring on a stretcher. But Malcolm believed in him. He came to Miami for the fight, bringing his family, his wife Betty, and their 3 young daughters. Malcolm's presence caused immediate problems. The Nation of Islam was controversial, and having its most famous minister associated with Clay threatened to get the fight canceled. Promoters panicked. Clay's own team begged him to distance himself from Malcolm, at least until after the fight. Clay refused. "Malcolm is my brother," he said. "If he can't come to my fight, then I don't want to fight." The promoters backed down. Malcolm stayed. And on the night of February 25, 1964, in one of the greatest upsets in boxing history, 22-year-old Cassius Clay defeated Sonny Liston when Liston refused to answer the bell for the 7th round. "I shook up the world," Clay screamed into the microphone. "I am the greatest." Malcolm was there in the dressing room afterward, beaming with pride. The photograph of Malcolm and Clay together after the fight, both men laughing and celebrating, became iconic. It captured a moment of pure joy, of friendship, of 2 black men defying a world that said they couldn't win. The next day, Clay held a press conference and announced that he'd joined the Nation of Islam. He said he was rejecting his slave name of Cassius Clay and would now be known as Cassius X, later changed to Muhammad Ali when Elijah Muhammad gave him that name personally. The announcement shocked America. A heavyweight champion joining what many considered a hate group? It was scandalous, controversial, and perfect for Ali's image as someone who refused to follow the rules. But something was happening inside the Nation of Islam that would destroy Ali and Malcolm's friendship. Malcolm was having doubts about Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the nation. Malcolm had learned that Elijah had fathered multiple children with young women in the organization, violating his own teachings about morality and righteousness. Malcolm felt betrayed. How could the man he called the messenger of Allah be living such a hypocritical life? Malcolm began speaking out, subtly at first, about the need for the nation to live up to its own standards. Elijah Muhammad didn't take kindly to being questioned. In November 1963, after President Kennedy's assassination, Malcolm made a comment that Kennedy's death was chickens coming home to roost, suggesting that America's violence abroad had returned to haunt it at home. Elijah used this as an excuse to silence Malcolm, suspending him from speaking publicly for 90 days. But the suspension was about more than one comment. It was about power. Malcolm had become too popular, too independent, too willing to question authority. Elijah saw him as a threat. The suspension was meant to humble Malcolm, to remind him who was in charge. Malcolm refused to be humbled. In March 1964, he announced he was leaving the Nation of Islam. He was starting his own organization, the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. He was breaking free from Elijah Muhammad's control and forging his own path. This put Ali in an impossible position. His mentor, the man who'd shaped his understanding of the world, was now considered an enemy of the nation. Elijah Muhammad made it clear, anyone who remained loyal to Malcolm would be cast out of the nation. Ali would have to choose. The pressure on Ali was enormous. Elijah Muhammad wasn't just a religious leader to Ali. He was a father figure, someone who'd given him his new name, someone who represented everything Ali believed about black pride and resistance. The Nation of Islam had become Ali's entire social world. His friends, his associates, his girlfriend Sonji, who would become his first wife, they were all connected to the nation. And then there were the threats. Malcolm had started receiving death threats from Nation of Islam members. His house was firebombed. He told friends he believed the nation was going to kill him. If Ali sided with Malcolm, he might face the same fate, or at least be expelled from the only community where he felt he truly belonged. Malcolm reached out to Ali, hoping his young friend would stand by him. They spoke on the phone. Malcolm explained his reasons for leaving, the hypocrisy he'd discovered, the need to follow his conscience, even when it meant standing alone. Ali listened, and then he made a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He chose Elijah Muhammad over Malcolm X. "You left the Honorable Elijah Muhammad," Ali told Malcolm coldly. "That was the wrong thing to do. I'm staying with the nation." The friendship was over. Just like that. The man who'd been Ali's teacher, his guide, his brother, was now dead to him. Ali stopped taking Malcolm's phone calls. When they crossed paths, Ali would look away. When reporters asked Ali about Malcolm, Ali would parrot the nation's line. Malcolm was a traitor, a hypocrite, someone who'd turned his back on the truth. Malcolm was devastated. He'd loved Ali like a younger brother. He'd invested time and energy into helping the fighter understand his own power and potential. And now Ali had abandoned him when he needed support the most. "He's just a dumb kid," Malcolm told friends, trying to hide his pain. "He doesn't understand what's really happening." But Malcolm understood something else. He understood that his days were numbered. The Nation of Islam wasn't going to let him live. He'd seen too much, said too much, knew too much. In one interview, Malcolm said, "I'm probably a dead man already." He was right. On February 21, 1965, less than 1 year after Ali won the championship, Malcolm X was assassinated. He was speaking at the Audubon Ballroom in New York when 3 men rushed the stage and shot him 21 times. He died at the age of 39. 3 members of the Nation of Islam were eventually convicted of his murder. When Ali heard the news, his reaction shocked people. He showed almost no emotion, no grief, no anger, just a cold indifference that seemed completely out of character. "He got what was coming to him," Ali said to reporters. "He went against the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. That's what happens when you turn your back on the truth." The words were cruel, but they were also protective. Ali was terrified. If the nation could kill Malcolm X, they could kill anyone. By publicly disavowing Malcolm, by showing no sympathy for him even in death, Ali was protecting himself. He was proving his loyalty to Elijah Muhammad and the nation. But privately, Ali was destroyed. Friends say he cried when he heard the news. He just couldn't show it publicly. The man who taught him to be proud, to think critically, to use his platform for something bigger than himself, was gone. And Ali had turned his back on him when Malcolm needed him most. For the next decade, Ali refused to speak about Malcolm. Whenever the subject came up, he'd change the topic or repeat the nation's propaganda. But something was changing inside him. As he matured, as he traveled the world, as he met people from different cultures and religions, Ali began to question the Nation of Islam's teachings. In the mid-1970s, after Elijah Muhammad's death, Ali quietly converted to mainstream Sunni Islam, rejecting the separatist ideology of the nation. He never explicitly said it was because of Malcolm, but the timing was significant. Malcolm had made a similar journey before his death, embracing a more universal form of Islam after his pilgrimage to Mecca. It wasn't until 2005, 40 years after Malcolm's assassination, that Ali finally spoke publicly about his regret. In his autobiography, Soul of a Butterfly, written when Ali was 63 years old and suffering from advanced Parkinson's disease, he wrote those devastating words, "Turning my back on Malcolm was one of the mistakes that I regret most in my life." It was a simple sentence, but it carried the weight of 40 decades of guilt. Ali had spent his entire adult life living with the knowledge that he'd abandoned his friend, his mentor, his brother, when that friend needed him most. And then Malcolm had been murdered, and Ali had praised his killers. "Malcolm was the most important person in my life besides my parents. He taught me everything I know about being a man, about standing up for what's right, about being proud of who you are. And when he needed me, I wasn't there for him. I let fear control me. I let other people tell me who I should be loyal to. That's something I have to live with." People who knew Ali say the regret was genuine and deep. He'd occasionally talk about Malcolm in private conversations, wondering what Malcolm would think of the man Ali had become, wondering if Malcolm would have forgiven him. Some who were close to Ali believed the guilt over Malcolm contributed to Ali's willingness to sacrifice so much for his own principles later in life. When Ali refused the military service in 1967, when he stood up to the entire United States government and risked everything for his beliefs, maybe part of him was trying to redeem himself. Maybe he was finally being the man Malcolm had tried to teach him to be, standing alone, refusing to compromise, accepting the consequences. The story of Ali and Malcolm is a tragedy. It's a story about 2 extraordinary men who found each other at the perfect time, who helped each other become who they were meant to be, and then were torn apart by forces bigger than both of them. It's a story about fear and courage, about loyalty and betrayal, about the price of standing up and the cost of backing down. Malcolm X never got to see Ali stand up to the government over Vietnam. He never got to see Ali become a global symbol of resistance and courage. He never got to see the shy young fighter he'd mentored become the greatest, not just in boxing, but in life. Malcolm died believing Ali had chosen comfort over courage, safety over truth. But Ali spent the rest of his life trying to prove that Malcolm's faith in him hadn't been misplaced. Every stand Ali took for justice, every time he sacrificed personal gain for principle, every time he used his platform to speak truth to power, he was honoring the lessons Malcolm had taught him. It was 40 years late, but Ali finally